Welcome!
Today we are going to review foods and drinks from 3 different cookbooks in no specific order. They are
Number 1. The Confederate Receipt Book. It was a book that focused on cooking during times of shortages. A lot of these recipes were later used during the Great Depression. It was originally written in a house in Richmond, Virginia, while the whole town was under strict naval blockade. This prevented a lot of foods from reaching the South, which up to that point had been focusing on growing cash crops and not food. It was originally printed on polka dot wallpaper, as there were shortages of regular paper during the time.
Number 2. The second book is The Frugal Housewife. This was a similar book that was popular among pioneers. It focused a lot on food that would not just nourish the body, but also help the body while it was recovering from illness. Not only that, but they also accomplished all of that on a budget. But this book doesn't just focus on budget meals, but also ways to cut costs around the house, such as how to raise your daughter, current political views, and how to build furniture, as just a few of the many other topics it covered.
Number 3. American Cookery. It is believed to be the first cookbook printed by an American for an American audience. This cookbook copied many popular recipes from other cookbooks and just substituted some of the ingredients for American ingredients. You can see some influences from the French in some of the recipes, as they use lots of butter or oil to cook some of the foods, while other non-French versions of recipes used a fraction of the amount. Guess the ingredients. Nice buns. It is a bread recipe and it has 5 ingredients. What do you think they are?
Bread.
Sadly, that's wrong. 3/4 of a pound of sifted flour, 2 large spoonfuls of brown sugar, 2 spoonfuls of good yeast, add a little salt, stir well together, and when risen, work into 2 spoonfuls of butter. Make into buns, set it to rise again, and bake in this. It is a very normal bread recipe.
There's lots of rising.
Indian bread. It is a cornbread recipe that has 5 ingredients. What do you think they are?
Bread.
And? And?
Bread and bread and bread.
Thank you. Sadly, that was wrong. 1 quart of buttermilk, 1 quart of cornmeal, 1 quart of coarse flour, 1 cup of molasses, and add a little soda and salt.
Wow.
A very normal cornbread recipe. A little too much flour for my taste, though. Apple pie without apples. It is a very normal apple pie recipe with 6 ingredients. What do you think they are?
I don't know.
What do you think the first ingredient is?
Not apples?
And?
Even more not apples.
And?
Even more?
And?
More.
And?
And more.
What do you think pies have? In general.
Not apples?
Sadly, that's wrong. They have a crust. The recipe is: to 1 small bowl of crackers that have been soaked until no hard parts remain, add 1 teaspoon of tartric acid, sweeten to your taste, add some butter, and a very little nutmeg. As you can see, this recipe was made under, shortages, as it has a lot of just substituting just for taste. I mean, it's calling itself apple pie when it's just soaked crackers with sugar and a little bit of acid. I mean, they're just making do. I mean, they're just trying to get a dessert on the table that they're like, that tastes somewhat good. My life is a little bit better now that I've eaten this during these trying times.
Yeah, so they're not just eating plain
Goulash and mush. Yes.
Slop.
Yeah, official oysters. It is an oyster recipe with 6 ingredients. What do you think they are?
Probably fish. And definitely not oysters. Not apples. No apples at all.
Mm-hmm.
No bread.
Now, sadly, it goes a more vegetarian route than what you were describing. Although it is not technically vegan because it uses egg and butter, It is very close to, it's a very good vegan recipe. I mean, vegetarian recipe. 1. Take young green corn, grated in a dish. To 1 pint of this, add 1 egg, well beaten, a small teacup of flour, 2 or 3 tablespoons of butter, some salt and pepper. Mix them all together. This amalgamates into like a really snotty concoction that has a little bit of like chewiness, which at the time oysters were really popular as a endurance enhancer in some very strenuous activities, though it was very hard to eat them outside of the coastal area, as they went bad really easily and people got food poisoning. So whenever they went out anywhere away from the coastal areas, they want to eat oysters as they're very fancy and expensive. And they can just eat this instead and have the same experience of eating something disgusting.
Yes.
Indian saccharines. It is a recipe for provisions on a trip, with 2 ingredients. What do you think they are?
Rice and bread.
Very close. It is cornmeal and brown sugar.
That wasn't tomato.
You caramelize the brown sugar, and then mix the cornmeal in, and then you lay it out and harden it. And then you slowly can like whittle down on it to get sugar and corn, which is very nutritious and energy giving. I would not recommend biting into it at all. They describe shaving it off a little bit as you need it.
That actually sounds pretty good.
Yes, it does. Tomato catsup. It is a very normal catsup recipe with 7 ingredients. What do you think they are?
Tomatoes, cats, and bread.
Sadly, you're missing 4 ingredients. Nice catsup may be made with 4 quarts of tomatoes, 1 pint of vinegar, 3 tablespoons of salt, 2 of mustard, 2 of black pepper, 3 red peppers broken, half an ounce of allspice or mace. It was the original name of the product that we now know as ketchup. A brand marketed their catsup as ketchup to be different than their competitors, and it worked. Calf's head. It is a very normal meat stew-like dish with an unspecified amount of ingredients. What do you think they are?
Beef.
Yes.
And water and salt and blood. Lots of blood.
Sadly, they didn't use the blood in this recipe, but they did use all the other usually discarded parts of the cow as they were having shortages and they needed to use all the cow to get sustenance and save on money. It describes the head, the heart, and the legs should boil full 2 hours. The liver should be boiled only 1 hour. It is better to leave the windpipe on, for if it hangs out of the pot while the head is cooking, all the froth will escape through it. As you know, they cared very much for the froth.
That's only natural.
Now you may wonder, what do they do with the brain? They made it into something what they describe as the calf's head side dish. How do you think it was prepared?
They took the brain and they did the little squishy.
Mm-hmm.
And then molded it into, I don't know.
You were really close on the right track. It describes it as this. The brains, after being thoroughly washed, should be put in a little bag with 1 pounded cracker, or as much crumbled bread, seasoned with sifted sage, and tied up and boiled for 1 hour. After the brains are boiled, they should be well broken up with a knife and peppered, salted, and buttered. As you can imagine,
tasty.
it's like a stuffing kind of almost at the end, which sounds very interesting. You can see they were even using the brain, which was usually used to tan leathers in the Indian culture, and has many dangerous ingredients in it, which is why they described to wash it thoroughly. You can see that they were really at their wits' end, even eating the brains of an animal, which at the time was very uncommon in the area. Do you want to know some fun facts?
Why, yes, I do.
During the times of the early 1800s, they called cornmeal Indian meal, as the Native Americans taught a lot of the settlers how to grow corn, and it was native to America, and they raised it. Although you can see that it is kind of racist and other sorts of such, we still enjoy cornmeal to this day.
The food you were fed as a prisoner of war during the Revolutionary War was very dependent on where you were imprisoned, who your guard was, and when during the war you were imprisoned. The guards were either men who were too old or too young to join the army, or people who were injured from the war and were recovering and could not join the war after they recovered. The prisoners were commonly served bread and the bad cuts of meat. The prisoners also often used the leftover bones, if there were any, and made jewelry and toothpicks from them. They also used whatever they could get their hands on to make different objects that they could later sell so that they could buy the luxuries of the day, such as cornmeal, coffee, sugar, and tobacco, that was often offered in exchange for the objects made by the prisoners by sympathizers on the outside. In Point Lookout, Maryland, the diet is described as good but scant, and consists of 1 loaf of bread per day, with vegetables and a little bit of meat, with vinegar to prevent scurvy. This is a good example that they did not really treat the prisoners badly. They did what was necessary to keep them in good health. For their breakfast, they were often served coffee, which at the time was something that men deemed necessary, and shows that they still treated them as fellow people and not just enemy scum. Though later on in the war, in a lot of prisons, they started to serve prisoners less and less rations, or decreased in the quality of the rations. This is because the rations that were used to feed the prisoners were being redirected to feed the soldiers at the front lines. A cause of the shortage of rations is because of the Anaconda Plan, where the North blockaded a lot of the major ports in the South.
Okay, so I'm going to put a blindfold on you and present you with 4 different pancakes. You'll have to pick out which one you think is the best one and what you think they are made out of. If you think there is something weird in it, now I will also be trying them with you. The 4 different recipes are the Confederate receipt book, slapjacks, the Frugal housewife, pancakes, American cookery, slapjack, and modern day pancake. Are you ready for pancake D?
D?
Yeah, D.
Sure. Okay, you're not gonna put it on the plate.
You can smell it a little.
3, 2, 1, now. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
It's not bad at all.
I think this one is good.
Definitely not bad.
This is pancake A. Okay.
I don't even know what to say about that one.
What ingredients do you think it had in it?
I have no clue. But it definitely wasn't the normal ingredients, that's for sure. It had much more of a... It was very firm. Kind of chewy. So it wasn't like fluffy at all. No, there is no fluff to that whatsoever.
This is pancake B.
Oh my. It smells very cinnamony.
What do you think it's made out of?
That's a good question. It definitely seems like it has egg in it for sure, because it has the same consistency as like an egg.
A lot of egg. You smelled cinnamon. You can kind of taste it too.
Yeah, just a little bit.
It's a little fluffier than the last one.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not sure.
Is pancake C.
This feels like a normal pancake.
Okay, okay. Now smell it. What does it smell like?
It smells like a normal pancake. Cornbread.
No, that was pancake C. What do you think it was made out of?
Well, it definitely has. It's definitely like cornbread. So it's a little dry,
Mm-hmm.
but slightly moist like cornbread.
Mm-hmm.
I really like cornbread.
There is the Confederate receipt book with 3 ingredients, with an optional 4th one. They are called slapjacks. There is the Frugal housewife. They have like 7-ish ingredients, and they call them pancakes.
Okay.
There is American Cookery with the Indian slapjack. They have 5-ish, 6-ish ingredients. They are called the Indian slapjack.
Mm-hmm.
There is the modern day instant pancake. It has 2 ingredients. Now, pancake A, which one do you think it is?
I think it was definitely the first one. What was it called? The slapjacks.
The Confederate receipt book?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Now for pancake B, which one do you think it was? The cinnamon one that you were described as cinnamon.
I think that was more of the Frugal housewife.
Mhm. Okay,
So
okay.
it could have been the instant one.
Okay, okay. Now for American Cookery, the Indian slapjack, which one do you think that one was?
The last one was definitely the Indian one.
The number C? Okay, okay. Now for pancake D that we ate first, which one do you think it was?
Maybe that was the instant one.
Pancake D was the instant? It was the first one we tried.
Yeah.
I can bring you pancake D and B if you want.
Sure.
Okay, okay.
Okay, so D is definitely the instant one.
D is instant?
Maybe not. I'm thinking that's the case. Because this one tastes like it has more than just 2 ingredients. I don't know though.
You can take your blindfold off.
I can see.
You were 100% correct.
I was?
Yes.
Wow.